Hey guys, get ready, get a pencil, get some books, and get ready to take some notes because we're sitting down with Brenden, one of the top public speakers in the game right now. He helps high-level CEOs and executives become the top 1% of communicators in their industries. We learned a lot in this episode, and we think you guys will too. Enjoy.
The Liquid Lunch Project, going from Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Matthew, I think we owe all millennials in America a giant apology. We've gotten them accustomed to paying less than they should for everything. All these rideshare companies are operating at a loss. These immediate delivery companies are selling profits at a loss just to acquire their clientele. We've literally created a consumer base that is expecting to pay less than they should for products. But now that all these companies are failing, we have to retrain these people to pay retail for things.
You know, Lou, I hate that word millennial. So I'm just going to stop you right there. I think the millennials that you're thinking about were about 10 years ago. You know, the millennials in this day and age are probably over 30. And I think they're actually getting accustomed to buying stuff right now. So we're going to agree to disagree on that one. However, you know, one thing that millennials can use instead of just being DMing, and they really need to communicate better, right? They really need to understand what it means to give a presentation and speak in front of people. So today we brought on Brenden.
LOL.
Brenden runs a YouTube channel called MasterTalk. He's one of the top 1% communicators in the industry who teaches not just millennials, but tech executives and any small business owner how to get ahead with communication. What's going on, Brenden?
Hey, it's great to be here, Matthew and Luigi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you.
So, Brenden, give us the background story, man. How did you get into public speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. And the long story short is it was an accident. I went to college and university for business school, and I thought I was going to be an executive. That was my goal in life, nothing fancy. So I did these things called case competitions, YouTube. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing baseball or basketball or rugby. I wasn't one of those guys. I did case competitions, which is the presentation version of that. And I did that competitively growing up. And it was through that experience that I started getting very good at presentations. But then I also got better at coaching people. Not because I was a great coach, but because the alternative they had was a rock. So I started helping all of the students, and that's how I gained a lot of expertise. And then a few years later, I had the idea for MasterTalk because I realized that everything that I was sharing with the students wasn't available for free online on the internet. So I started making videos, and here we are today.
That's awesome, man. And not just making videos, but you're actually going out and you're helping executive levels, you know, level up in the field that they're in by doing it too with a coaching program. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the context of this conversation with small business owners. What I would say you two is the following. When we think about our businesses and our communication, we often have goals for our finances. We often have goals for our health. We have goals for our relationship, but very few executives and business owners I've seen in my career have communication goals. So we always think about what is our goal. We always think about who's already achieved the goal that we want, whether it's a 7-figure business, whether it's 90% profit margin, whatever the goal is. But we don't think about the person who's already achieved that. What type of communicator are they? So the question I always ask people to start this off is, as the business scales, are your communication skills scaling with the business? And this is something that I find a lot of owners don't really think about. Example, let's say you have an early 6-figure business. Usually you're managing every part of the value chain, right? Sales, marketing, delivery, ascension. But as the business scales, you can't do everything anymore. So you have to create SOPs, standard operating procedures, and start delegating the work to everyone else. But if you don't have sharp communication skills, you're creating a lot of inefficiencies in the business, and we help a lot of executives remove those inefficiencies really quickly.
Brenden, help us pop the hood and look what's underneath. Are you working on body language, intonation, eye contact, or are there certain like verbal cues that you're teaching people to develop?
Yeah, absolutely, Luigi. So the way that we define communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? So one of those balls is eye contact, one of them is smiling, one of them is body language, another one is storytelling. And the mistake that most of us make is we try and juggle all 18 at the same time. So instead, our philosophy is work on one ball at a time until it's mastered. And for us, what that looks like is mostly verbal communication at the beginning. I think personally, body language is like ball number 15 because a lot of people don't really make mistakes with body language, whereas they're scared of presentation. So the first ball is something like the random word exercise. Pick a random word like tissue box, like sofa, like couch, and create random presentations out of thin air. And what this helps us do, you two, is if we can make sense out of nonsense, we can make sense out of anything. And that exercise builds resilience to help us communicate more effectively.
You know, I love that. This is an area that I'm looking to get into, you know, is speaking, you know, getting up on stages, because it's a lot. Me and Luigi do a lot of one-on-one work, right? But it's a lot easier if you can get on the stage and instead of doing something one-on-one, bring your message to the masses, and you could benefit a lot more people in that way. As a matter of fact, I'm reading a book right now called Lead with a Story, right? So, but it's for me personally, right? Reading it in a book and not practicing it is kind of like learning to drive a car with a manual and not doing it at all. So if somebody never spoke before, but they have an inkling like me to speak, where do they even start?
Right. I mean, you hit it on the nail, Matthew. A lot of people read books, whereas I go, look, at the end of the day, team, the best way to speak is to speak. It's not to read a bunch of books. We're not going to get there. We're not going to get the result that we're looking for. So I completely agree. I would say the first step before we go into the random word exercise that we talked about is something, you know, it sounds esoteric. It sounds a little woo-woo, but it's true. Is when was the last time we dreamed about our communication skills? We dream about the expensive vacations we want to go on, the houses we want to buy, the things we want to get. When was the last time we actually dreamed about a result that we want in our communication? And the answer is never. Why? Because we think communication is a chore, like doing the dishes. We think about the stress, the negativity, the hatred around it. Oh my God, I have to do this. And nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes. Doesn't matter if you're in real estate, doesn't matter if you're an executive, doesn't matter if you're any industry. So we need to unlearn that first. So the question that I ask people is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Because communication, team, is so much more than just making more money. It's the way that we talk to our families. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we meet strangers when we travel. And once we have that burning desire first, that keeps us motivated, which I believe is the number one challenge of communication, not fear. Because once we're motivated to get the job done, we can actually practice the random word exercise.
You know, I believe that so much. I mean, if you look at every successful business leader out there, their communication was spot on point. You know, if they were just a bully and said, hey, go get it done, but they couldn't communicate what they wanted to, it doesn't work out at the end of the day, and they don't build a real company. You know, I mean, some of the biggest CEOs in the world are the best communicators in the world.
Absolutely. And to set context, I'm sure both of you already know this, but the reason is fairly simple because a lot of early stage CEOs, they think their role is just sales and marketing and, you know, meeting a couple of people and getting more sales in the business. But the truth is every time you interact, there's an opportunity to grow your business. Why? Because every time you talk, it's not just about getting a sale or marketing your business. It's about marketing to potential candidates to work for you. It's about setting a big enough vision that the 10 out of 10 talent in the marketplace can see themselves and their vision being fulfilled in your bigger dream. It's being able to communicate your idea across a multitude of mediums, not just in a town hall meeting with your internal team, but also when you're on a podcast, when you're at a convention, when you're being interviewed at a conference. All of those mediums is an opportunity for us to outcompete other people in the marketplace. And I find a lot of business owners don't really understand the urgency of really putting themselves out there, even if they're not great communicators to begin with.
You know, we're talking about why people should do it. I think a lot of the audience members understand that they and know deep down inside that they need to do it, but they don't know how, or just how to get started, or where do I start? So what tips can you offer us there?
Right. So let's start with the beginning. So we went to the dream piece. We started with that because that's so important. Then the next one, we talked about the random word exercise. So the reason the random word exercise is important, team, is because it's an easy way to practice thinking on our feet. So that's ball number one. So before we even move to ball number two, you know, the biggest pet peeve I have always when I'm talking about tips is people aren't applying it. They take a note on the random word exercise, but when was the last time they did it? And this is what I do when I'm talking to clients. I go, what percentage of your industry is willing to do the random word exercise 100 times, which only takes 100 minutes out of your life, like max 2 hours. And most people answer 1%, 2%. Exactly. Be the person who does the exercise. That's ball number one. Ball number two is question drills. We get asked questions all the time in our life, you two, on podcasts, at work, at school, in different environments. But most of us, and when we're raising capital, we're reactive to the question. We wait for Matthew and Luigi to ask the question, and then we go, what's the answer to that? Instead of being proactive. So a few years ago when I started podcasting, I sucked. I was terrible at it. You know, somebody asked me a question. He said, where does the fear of communication come from? I looked at the guy and I said, I don't know, man. Los Angeles, San Diego, you tell me. So how do you be more proactive about that? Every day for 5 minutes, write down the answer to a question every single day for 5 minutes. If you do that every day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry, your products, your services, and you'll be bulletproof in front of any prospect. But most people don't put in the work to get the job done.
You know, that's so true, because when I started my career on Wall Street, I was cold calling, selling stocks over the phone, right? And you get the same questions over and over and over, and you're comfortable. You know what the next question's coming, so you're prepared, and you know where you're taking that question next, so you can control the flow of conversation, right? You know, mostly be like, oh, I have to talk to my wife. That's great. You can go talk to your wife. But in the meantime, what about this, this, and this, right? To make it flow where you want to do. But one thing that I struggle with personally when it comes to speaking, and I've even gotten asked to speak on stages, it's what do I want to speak about? I don't even know where to begin. So how do you help people choose what direction they want to go when they're unsure?
For sure, Matthew. So for content specifically, that's a bit different advice, because usually what I found with my history working with people, delivery is always the problem. It's almost never content. And the reason is because people are generally know what they're talking about. That's how they made it to their part of their career, but it's how do you package that? So we covered the delivery side. Let's go into content. So here's what I have people do. And people can literally just do this as they're listening to this podcast, is make a list of every possible topic that you're interested in presenting. So let's say I was coaching you, we're on a call. I would say make a list of all of those things: real estate, your experience on Wall Street, finance, capital raises, you know, just make a motivation, make a list of all of them. And then it could be 10, 15, 20 topics. That's step one. Step two is to write a number next to each topic, answering the following question that I'll repeat twice. On a scale of 1 to 10, how energetically excited are you to present this topic 100 times? Right, so let me repeat that again. On a scale of 1 to 10, how energetically excited are you to present that same topic 100 times? And then the next part of that question is change 100 for 1,000 times. And the reason that question gives us the right frame of mind for the topic team is because if you want to be the best in the world in communication, all of them share one thing in common for the most part, is that they do the same thing over and over again. Gary Vaynerchuk, yo, what's up, guys? I grew up in Belarus and Russia, and then I flew in. Do you have any questions for me? Tony, right?
Yeah, I think create a story. They stick to the story, but change the narrative in which way they want it to go. Does that make sense?
100%, right? Tony Robbins has been doing the same bloody conference for 40 years. UPW, Unleash the Power Within, Date with Us. And it's amazing. I've been to them. It's not a hit. It's not a dig on Tony Robbins. But the point I want to drive is that's what the best in the world are doing. And that's what we need to do. So there's a lot of things we can talk about. But if we focus our energy on one, we become known for something. And that's what leads to the professional career that we can have in speaking.
Brenden, I want to get a little bit granular just to help the audience,
please,
on a global scale. So a guy like Matthew is on the phone all day long. So he's not doing it 365 times a year. He's probably doing it 365 times a week. So it comes a little bit more natural to him. But how do you help someone create that leap of faith where it's not a Matt and Lou with Brenden, but it's Brenden giving a best man speech in front of 400 people, and he's never done that before? How do you create that leap of faith in someone that's a novice?
Yeah, right. Absolutely, Luigi. So what I would say always, and this is why I keep talking about the random word exercise, there's a point to that. And the reason I say that is because the game is momentum, Luigi. We need to get small wins over time. The problem with the best man speech and just going right into that is you don't really give those a lot. It's kind of ad hoc. And when it happens, you usually find out last minute, it causes you a lot of stress. And I'm a big fan of never preparing or never being in the moment, but preparing for the moment. So example, let's use a client example. Let's say somebody does the random word exercise 100, 200 times, which doesn't take a long time. And if they do that, what happens is they start to feel really confident. And it happens all the time. Why? Because if you could talk about subjects that you have zero expertise in, when you go back to the phone call in Matthew's case, when you go back to your local situations that are more frequent and common, those situations become a joke because you're in the same industry for 10, 15 years. It's not like one day you're talking about oranges, the next day you're talking about pineapples, like in the random word exercise. And that's one small example and how we get momentum. Same thing with question drills. Yeah, the first time people do question drills, Luigi and Matthew, it sucks. It's like, oh my God, I don't know the answer to. Like me, I started coaching CEOs when I was 22. So it's very nerve-wracking. My average client's like 47 years old, right? But when you do the question drill 700 times, you're not scared of anything anymore because you focused all that energy in one area of expertise. So you're definitely going to be a few chapters ahead of anyone that you're working with or helping with along the journey.
Let's touch on that for a second. So at 22, your average, you started coaching CEOs and executives, right?
Correct.
Were you nervous at first? Did you have any imposter syndrome walking into these first couple?
Absolutely.
Calls? So let's talk about that. How did you get out of that and get out of your own head?
100%. So let's touch upon imposter syndrome. And I'm the case in point. I started working with CEOs when I was 22, and I'm really grateful for everything I've done in the past few years. But the better question that's more helpful for the audience is how do we overcome imposter syndrome? So here's an analogy I'll give you two. It's a very simple one, but I think it proves the point. Where are you two based out of curiosity? I'll use you two as examples.
Luigi's in New York. I'm in Florida.
Okay, Luigi, New York, Florida. Gotcha. So let's use New York as an example. Luigi's in New York, right? Just to make
Yes,
sure.
sir.
Okay, awesome. So let's say you live in Manhattan. Okay, let's say you live in New York City. It's a very simple analogy.
He does.
Okay, awesome. Simple. Okay. So I come to Manhattan and I come to New York City. It's my first time in the city, let's say, and I've never been there. And I go, Luigi, what should I do in the city? Which pizza place should I eat? I heard the New York pizza is amazing. What should I do here? You'll probably tell me. You'll probably say, oh, Brenden, go to this place, check out Times Square, go to this hidden pizza place that nobody knows about. You got to go there. Am I right in saying that, Luigi? You'd probably tell me, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, you'd probably be living through my experience and not what you want, unfortunately. Right?
Right, but you've lived in the city for a while, so you have some expertise. You'll probably do that. And the same thing, Matthew, if I came to Florida, you'd probably do the same thing, right?
No, there's no good pizza places down here.
Right.
Are you kidding me? Matt and Mickey have tight.
Nope. Listen, on a different note, there are no good pizza places down here. Yeah, I'll say it again. There's no good pizza places down here, so I'm not going to help you out on that one.
Right, but I
get the point. I get the point.
Fair enough, right? So for the audience, if I asked Matthew, where should I go? What should I eat? He'll probably say, screw the pizza, but eat something else, and this is really good. In the same way, by the way, if you two came to Montreal and said, hey, I'm in the city for a week, what should I do? I'll probably tell you. I'll probably say, go to this restaurant, do this, but unless you're vegetarian, then don't go there. All that stuff. But don't you find that bizarre, team? Because we're not tour guides. We don't have expertise in travel, yet we talk about what you should do when you're in our city without really second guessing it. Whereas when it comes to other pieces of information, like our subject matter expertise, we hesitate a lot. Oh, is this the right information? Should I share it? Am I competent? Whereas with the information, because our parents aren't the mayor of Florida, New York, though I could be wrong one of these days, I won't be, or Montreal, we're still open about sharing that information. And we don't even question whether or not that's the best advice. So why is there a discrepancy between certain pieces of information and others? That's really the question. And what it comes down to, in my opinion, is what does expertise even mean, guys? And for me, expertise is not having a master's degree, having a PhD. It's being one chapter ahead, not 10, not a million, one chapter ahead of the person that you're helping. That's it. And the same way both of you could teach me a lot more about Wall Street than I could ever know. I could probably teach you something about communication and public speaking. And there's other people who are better than me, and there's other people that I could help. So what's the advice? The advice is the best way to overcome imposter syndrome is start with the person you're comfortable with first. Sure, I could brag about all the CEOs I coached today, but I didn't start there. I started with people who are younger than me. That's where I was comfortable with. Start 15-year-olds. Then I worked my way to 17-year-olds, then people my own age, then people a little bit older than me. And then the way that I developed my executive experience, because when you think executive, you think 45-year-old man, 50-year-old women. No, a lot of my friends were technology CEOs. They were raising 7-figure rounds and they were 22 years old. That was my first executives. And then I just aged up because I just got better and better over time. And this is why I always say confidence comes from competence. You learn it over time. And one other quote by Ali Gadan, I'll throw back to you guys, is if you help one person, the world will give you permission to help everyone else. Except the problem is people don't go from 0 to 1.
I love that. I love just teach, just be one chapter ahead of the person that you're teaching. I mean, that's so simple, but so true, right?
That's it.
Because I mean, even with the pizza scenario, right? You're just drawing from your experience and what you know. So I think we get in our own way sometimes and we just start to overthink things and we talk ourselves out of not getting on stage.
I mean, let's roll on that because I think that's such a great point, Matthew. I had every excuse in the book not to do what I did. Every excuse in the book. I had a very high-paying job at IBM. I was going to be an executive at the company by the time I was 30. I had no business being a YouTuber sharing communication knowledge. So why did I do it?
That's my next question to you.
Right? Why did I bother? I didn't do it for executives because I didn't even know you could make money doing this, and I was already doing fine. It was never about executives. It was about the 15-year-old girl who couldn't afford me. Who does she have? If she's 13 years old, when Elon was 15, he was some kid in South Africa that nobody cared about. Who's helping that person? And the only people on the internet at the time, anyways, were 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds who had 7 PhDs in communication. You didn't understand a word that they were saying. So I was never making it for people who were older than me. I was always making it for the 15-year-old girl. And that's still the mission today. And that's what pushed me to take action. And that's what my coach teaches me is, are we making an excuse to do something or not do it? And there's 2 types of people in the world. There's somebody who's going to make an excuse to say, I'm tired. I can wait till I have a mortgage and I have kids and I can do it. And there's people who say, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm not going to share this with 45-year-olds, but I'll share it with the 15-year-old person who needs me. And it just aged up over time. That's it.
I think what you wound up doing is attracting other people to you as you were building up your own skill, right? It's just a natural progression of anything. You're always going to be better if you keep going than the day you first started.
Correct. And I always say that execution always leads to luck, not the other way around. I don't think luck leads to execution. Like as I kept working on it, my business partner's in his 40s, right? And that's how I was able to build the business from there.
So Lou, were you on any debate teams? Did you talk to me about your presentations?
Matt, you know what? As we've been talking, I just had this aha moment. You know, sometimes you go through things in life, you don't realize how or why they happen, and you kind of think they're goofy. But speaking to Brenden now, I had a high school professor, and I think a couple of my high school buddies are listening right now. His name was Mr. Dubois, and Mr. Dubois had a speech class. And what he would make us do for the first semester is he'd make us get up every Friday and speak for 5 minutes on any subject that we wanted. And all he said was, I'm only concerned about your eye contact, your elocution, and your intonation. I don't care about the subject matter. Now you tell that to a couple of 16-year-olds and you get some really creative subject matter, especially in an all-boys school. However, he pivoted in the second semester and then he starts throwing out real work. But that 16-year-old kid who never spoke in front of 40 people now has the confidence and the chutzpah to get up there and talk about Beowulf and, Shakespeare. So in his simplicity, I think he did a really good thing to these 40, 16-year-old kids.
Listen, I think it's amazing. And I think it should be taught public speaking in every school because, listen, as we said earlier in the podcast, I think communication is the most powerful tool that anybody can have, right? We can mold that communication in any way, shape, or form that we want for what we need it to do. But if you can communicate properly, you're 10 times ahead of the competition.
I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think the challenge that we have right now in the education system, you too, is a lot of us grow up believing that communication is a chore because of the way communication is currently taught. Why? Because all of those presentations are mandatory, right? Luigi said it best. You're talking about Shakespearean poetry. You're not talking about something you actually care about. Though some kids might care about Shakespearean poetry, but I would argue most people don't. So they're always different. They're always mandatory. You're always forced to present. It's never what do you care about? What are you passionate about? Versus with sports, that's an optional. It's an opt-in. People decide to do that for themselves. So they grew up with fond memories of it. And then the third piece, which is the worst thing of all, that I'm glad, Luigi, your teacher help alleviate in some way with his students or her students, depending on him or her, is the piece that communication is tied with a punishment. So if you don't do well in the education system, you don't get a pat on the back, you get a slap in the face, and you lose 25% of your grade, which is crazy to put 12-year-old kids through. And it's no wonder why we're all scared of it.
Brenden, let me ask you a question. How do you deal with your clientele with that intangible asset of relatability? And let me preface it for you. Matt and I go to a lot of networking events. We go to a lot of functions. And sometimes the public speakers could be very sharp. I mean, they could be PhDs. They could have more initials after their name than Sesame Street. However, they don't relate to you. You cannot follow them. And then on the flip side, you've got some guys that have a little bit more street charisma and are very relatable, but their message is, let's say, less than credulous. So how does a person who's well-spoken and well-articulate, how do you kind of create that relativity?
Absolutely, Luigi. And, let's go through the simple principle, which is make the world your teacher. I don't really see myself as the teacher on this podcast. I see it more as, what can I learn from Matthew and Luigi that I haven't thought of in my game, that isn't sharp yet, that needs help, that needs more improvement. But the other piece to that is understanding what empathy means, in my opinion, Luigi. And for me, empathy does not mean speaking to the person we are today, but rather speaking to the person we used to be. And when we think about the person we used to be, then we start to gain more context and also more sympathy for some of the challenges we might have had earlier in the journey. So for example, I struggled with communication most of my life. And Luigi, since you know the schools well, also in Montreal that you need to know how to speak French, which is a language I didn't know. So my whole life I was communicating and presenting in a language I didn't even know. So I definitely struggled with communication, and I have a crooked left arm. So no one wanted to be friends with me because of a surgery ahead. And what happens is when we go back to who we used to be, that frame of mind really helps us on a podcast. That's why I never talk about things like glossophobia, which is the medical term for the fear of communication, because it's not helpful. It doesn't help people. It makes me look smart, but it doesn't actually get people results. So what's the bottom line, team? The bottom line is we need to be more willing to ask powerful questions to the people we actually want to serve. And that's what's led to my success, either with clients or just people in general. And I'll give you a couple one that people can copy paste. One is, if you're in my shoes, how would you communicate my ideas better? If you had to introduce me to anyone else in your network that you think would help develop and improve my ideas, who would you introduce me to and why? And the third question is, that I got from Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, if you had to remove one part of my speech, if you had to, what part of my speech would you remove and why? And this forces negative feedback.
I love that. So where can the audience find you and the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're dropping all these notes. I'm going to go back and rewatch the show because I got to go down and write down all these notes, man. You gave me
Matt,
so
I got
much.
the best way for you to practice your articulation. Pronounce Brenden's name 5 times.
We'll try that after the show's over. So tell everybody where they can find you, your coach. I think you have a free coaching call with people that are interested. So why don't you let the audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me on. It was such a great conversation. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is a free live Zoom call that I do every 3 weeks. It's fun, it's live, it's interactive. It's not some boring webinar. And I facilitate it. And if you want to register for it, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
I'm definitely jumping on that. I think Luigi's going to jump on there too. I think we might be doing some business together in the future, Brenden. So I'm glad you came on the show. Before I let you run, I'm going to ask you one question, right? And I change it up every now and then. So I'm going to change this one up for you. Forget communication. You can't speak on communication. What's the other topic that you'd love to speak on?
Yeah, when I started my career, I kind of oscillated between three areas. Communication was the first one. The other two was career coaching, and the third one's life coaching. I'd probably give life advice.
I really thought he was going to say girls in Montreal.
Definitely not an expert in that, Luigi. Trust me.
Brenden, thank you so much for being here, man. We're going to be respectful of your time. We really appreciate you. I think the audience got a lot. Guys, go out, get in touch with Brenden. get on that webinar, and I'm sure you'll find some great ways to enhance your public speaking. That's a wrap. The Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you in the next episode.
Au revoir.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of The Liquid Lunch Project.